everybody, to our first Center for Global Studies Centennial Speaker Series talks. So the first of three that we're going to have this summer. Our first one is always, or usually I shouldn't say always, because I don't know, this is only my second summer doing this. But usually we have students that present the research that they've been doing with us at the University of Wyoming. My name is Warren Crawford. I am the Associate Director for Global Engagement at the University of Wyoming. And so I'm excited to be here and happy to be here. I get the distinct pleasure of introducing our speakers for today. So we'll tell you just a little bit about them, let them talk about their research, and then there'll be time for you to ask any questions that you would like. Most of them have had plenty of questions because they've defended their research. They've been grilled plenty, so I don't think there's a question that they wouldn't be able to ask. Is that fair to say? Maybe. So first of all, I would like to introduce our first speaker will be Shawn Enriques. Shawn is a recent UW graduate. He's from Greeley, Colorado. Received his PhD in management and marketing. Shawn is going to be talking to us about the consumerism in the Philippines. And so he investigated the effects of bottom of the pyramid marketing. So interesting to hear from Shawn. Next, we will hear from Gwen Stout, as a current PhD student from Cheyenne in curriculum and instruction, with an emphasis in literary education. She'll be talking to us about language literacy in Okinawa, where she looked at improving oral language, reading comprehension, and writing skills of multilingual English-speaking Japanese students, kindergarten through high school. So we'll be interested to hear about that. And then we'll finish up with Naznin, a recent master's graduate from Bangladesh. I learned that Naznin will be pursuing her PhD at Georgia State University after this. Correct, Georgia State in Atlanta, yes. So, but she could be talking to us about women's participation in Bangladesh's political, national, and local government. So she can kind of compare Bangladesh political systems to the U.S. So yeah, really interested to hear about that. So with that, our first presenter, I will turn it over to Shawn.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak and share my research with you today. As he said, my name is Shawn Enriques. I graduated from the University of Wyoming in December last year, and my focus is really in marketing, And today what I'm going to share with you is some research that was sponsored by the Center for Global Studies. They provided me with enough money to pay for the participation for all of the people that took the study. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And then thank you, Centennial Library, for hosting this event and keeping us a forum to share our research. So today I'm going to talk to you about single serving packaging. And so to talk about that, I'll talk to you about bottom of the pyramid marketing, which is the driver for creating these small packages, the challenge and the Philippine context, and then the research is done through conjoint analysis. So I'll give you a quick explanation of what that is and how it helps me to understand the problem. And we'll go through some results and discussion. So bottom of the pyramid marketing is from Prahlad and Hart in 2002. And what they said was that traditional marketing really focuses on the wealthier people. So people in the United States, they're kind of at the top of the pyramid where they're making a lot more money than the rest of the world is. So there's about 100 million, at the time of their paper, there's about 100 million people in that 20,000 over income bracket. At the same time, there were a lot more people at the tier 4 billion people that are making less than $1,500 a year. But if you put those numbers together, if you multiply 20,000 by 100 million, and then you multiply 1,500 by 4,000, you see those are fairly equivalent. So the market's size in terms of spend is about the same, but there are drastic differences in each of those different categories. And how do you sell to someone who's making such a small amount of money? What they came up with was, or what the industry came up with was small sachet packaging. So rather than in America, you would see your laundry detergent coming in a very large, 40 load size container. In the Philippines, in India, Bangladesh, a lot of places around the world, you'll buy it in a single use. So enough soap for you to do one load of laundry. And they do that because most people can't afford to buy a large box and have it sit on the shelf. They're so financially limited because of the limited amount of money they make and the uncertainty in how much money they're going to be making from week to week, that they need to buy those in very small packages. So those small packages are great because it allows people with very low incomes to use products that we take advantage of every day. The challenge is that because you're buying it in individual packages, the packaging becomes a larger proportion of the cost and a larger proportion of the materials that are wasted. So I have a quick 2-minute video. It talks about sachet packaging and bottom of the pyramid in the Philippines. So I hear the sound might be a little bit quiet, so there are subtitles, so hopefully you can hear those. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me after the video plays.
Ang sachet mabenta kaysa sa bote-bote kasi yun ang kaya nga ng namin mga mahihirap lang. Sa bote kasi mahal yan eh. Nakita ko na kung magkano ang presyo yan. Sa akin, ang gusto ko sachet. Talagang mas nakakatipid.
To government and producers, they should modify sustainable packaging for consumer products. One commodity at a time. They cannot simply, stop plastic use and then look for an alternative. They can do it one at a time.
So anyone have any questions about the video, or they were able to read the subtitles?
I was struck by the Philippines providing 36% of the plastic pollution in the oceans. What percentage of the world population it can't be? And that's really out of whack.
It's a very small amount. I think one of the reasons that it is disproportionately high is because the other nations that are using these small packaging, they're more inland and landlocked in general, and the Philippines are consisting of I think 7,000 islands, so it's very easy for that waste to disseminate through the Pacific Ocean.
Is the packaging itself recyclable?
So it's not. It's multi-layered thin film packaging. So it's plastic, kind of a aluminum layer and another plastic layer. So they have this external protection from shipping, and they have an internal protection layer for the product to make sure that it doesn't go bad. And then there's a structural layer between that. And to separate those, you pretty much have to burn it. And so you can collect the aluminum, but that's all. And then you create also a lot of volatile compounds when you do burn that. So you can see the Philippines is not really unique to this issue. There are a lot of countries that are in this extreme poverty level, and in 2013, that extreme poverty level is less than $30 a day, or less than $30 a day. About 15 years ago, that used to be $1 a day. So things have moved up because of inflation and some other numbers, but in the study that was done in 2013, I median split, so I split them in half based on their income levels. And the low income level was making 340 to about 2,800 pesos per week, which converts to about $1 to $1.80 or to $7.80 per week per person in their household. Higher incomes were at $7.80 to $22. So you can see it's still a low amount that they're living on, and it does constrain them, not so much in the higher income group. So the research question was, if single-use packaging is preferred by low-income households and not higher-income households, then packaging waste is minimized. But if that's not true, if that doesn't hold true, then packaging waste can become an additional issue for bottom of the pyramid marketing. And so I used the Howard and Chef model of buying behavior to suggest that when people buy things, they often get into a habit of buying something. So if you go to the store and you're used to buying Cheerios, you'll always just go and buy Cheerios. And it takes some event or some additional knowledge for you to change your behavior. So I thought that people would just be stuck in their routines, and if they're low income level earners and they use sachet packaging, they would just continue to do that even though their incomes are increasing. And so I wanted to test that. And so some of the research questions are, do low-income households prefer single-use packaging? Do high-income households prefer it as well? And then is bottom of the pyramid marketing achieving its goals of bringing products to low-income families? And is it leading to unnecessary waste? So as a thought experiment for you, imagine that you're going on vacation and you have these 3 hotels to choose from: Four Seasons, Motel 6, or Ramada Inn. Which one, just in your own minds, which one would you select? If that was the only choice you were making, no other information. And the same thing, as a totally separate question, would you rather pay $70, $150, or $300 for your night stay? But I think if you ask those questions separately, you're going to wind up with the Four Seasons, and you're going to want to pay $70. Right? So if we ask those questions separately, it doesn't give us a whole lot of information. We're not allowing those trade-offs to happen. So conjoint analysis provides these different packages of goods and makes people make choices on those. So they internally make those trade-off decisions. And this is the one example of the screens that participants saw on iPad when they were taking the survey. So they're choosing from packaging A, which is 5 uses, a resealable bag that leads to no additional packaging waste, versus 15 uses in a reusable container with 40% increase in packaging waste, or a single use, that sachet that I was talking about earlier, that's not resealable and leads to 20% increase in waste. And then for statistical purposes, the none of the above allows for zero choice. But they're presented with 12 of these different options. And as they select, the statistics creates these part words. So it tries to determine which things are most important for this particular consumer and what prices they're willing to pay for it. And so the results of those questions were, do low-income households prefer single-use packaging? The answer was no. They actually, if you ask them the question, 70% of them suggest that they would buy bulk packaging, bulk being kind of the American size. And higher income households, they do prefer the bulk packaging, which is a good thing. 91% of them say that they prefer the bulk packaging. So only 9% is leading to extra waste. The third question is bottom of the pyramid marketing achieving its goal in making products accessible to low-income families? And the answer was yes. However, I noticed in the data that consumers are really preferring to buy bulk rather than the individual packaging, but they're constrained by the amount of money they have and the potential for uncertainty. And so one conclusion is that bottom of the pyramid marketing is leading to some additional waste that 9% of those wealthy individuals who theoretically should be buying bulk packaging but are buying single use just for the convenience of it. And then we also have to consider the packaging waste that is just from the low income people using those products. So the discussion and some of the points that I wanted to drive home were bottom of the pyramid marketing is really important for us to address low income earners and give them an ability to use these household products. But 51% of them are buying these products, where 70% of them would prefer those products. And so we do see evidence that there's a constraint making them make a different choice than what they would like. In the high-end earners, their stated preference was 91% that they would want to buy bulk, and the conjoint was about that 90%. So they were in line, suggesting that they weren't constrained in their purchases. I had a little bit more research to do in the statistics, so but those are the things that I had for my conclusions in the research. So thank you very much.
Hello. Okay. Just to refresh, I'm Gwen Stout, and I'm going to present on the research that we did in Japan. And the title is Enhancing Reading Comprehension and Writing Skills Through Structured Literacy for Language in Japanese School-Age Students. Just a little bit about me. I am, as mentioned, I'm a first-year doc student in curriculum instruction with emphasis in literacy. My background is that I have my master's from the University of Wyoming as well in speech-language pathology. But I was really excited to participate in this research, and I'm excited to share what we've started so far. So here is our research team intermixed with the Da Vinci International School teachers. So I don't know if I can do this. On the far left is Dr. Doug Peterson, who we went with. I'm in the middle, and then on the bottom left is an undergraduate student, Adriana Maraguero, and then next to her is, now, she just graduated with her doctorate last weekend, Dr. Elisa Konishi-Turkelson. So we all traveled together to Japan. Why Japan? So this project is a continuation of a long-standing research to practice partnership. So some of the members of our research team traveled there last year to gather assessment data for another assessment, and also did some professional development for a variety of different schools there. Dr. Elisa Konishi-Torkelson knew another speech-language pathologist that was working in the area, and she helped connect us to some schools, and then we just continued with the one school this year. And we did a lot of training with them, and then also helped gather some assessment data for them. So about the participants, we helped assess around 200 multilingual Japanese English-speaking students in kindergarten through 12th grade. These students were attending the school because they had some sort of learning challenge that was not being met in their previous schools, so they chose to come to this school for extra support and help. And yes, they do speak English. They all had a variety of time exposure to English. It was interesting to speak with some of the high schoolers and talk about how long that they had been speaking English, and then the other languages they also had or also know. So it was fun to learn about. And why were we focusing on language? So when we look at Scarborough's reading rope, which is the figure on the right, there's two main things that go into skill reading. Language comprehension, which is the blue threads, and then word recognition or decoding, which are the green shades. And we need both of those to understand what we're reading. Sadly, most US students do not understand grade level material. Previously, a lot of our focus in education has focused on that decoding and word recognition, and we're learning now that we need more focus on those language aspects. Research indicates that approximately only 20% of students need that targeted support on decoding or word recognition, but 60 to 80% of students would benefit from an increased emphasis on language. And so, by using the Cube 3, which is an assessment that I'll show you in a minute, this assessment represents advancements in language assessment that allows educators to accurately, reliably, and efficiently measure all critical dimensions of literacy. That includes language, decoding, and their product reading comprehension. And students who don't have that foundational oral language skill have considerable more difficulty with understanding and meeting academic expectations, with the majority of those students not meeting their grade level academic standards. So we really need to figure out how to help boost that reading ability of our students. So the overall purpose of the study was, as I mentioned, to continue that long-standing research to practice partnership, and then also to examine the extent to which the implementation of systematic and explicit oral language instruction, essentially practicing retelling stories, in Japan would improve their oral language, reading comprehension, and writing. Another main purpose was to provide the staff some professional development and training on gathering the benchmark or the assessment information, which we used as our pre-test data, and then as well as professional development on providing the intervention to the students. The study design will be a randomized controlled trial. So we've gathered all the pretest data. Students will then, or are now being randomly assigned to either a treatment or a control condition. The treatment group will receive systematic and explicit oral language instruction for 8 weeks. So they receive 20 minutes of small group instruction daily, based on Story Champs, which was also created by Dr. Peterson and Dr. Spencer, and then they'll switch. So after that treatment group initially receives intervention and the control group just receives business as usual, we'll gather post-test data, and then they'll switch. So both groups will still receive that intervention, and then we'll gather more data at the end as well. So a little bit more about MTSS support, which is multi-tiered systems of support, which is built into the system. And that really is just having different support based on where the students' needs are. Do the students need whole class instruction? Do they need small group instruction, or more targeted individual instruction? And we supported this by helping the schools gather benchmark data, which is our pre-test information, and then also help with professional development. That benchmark data, after we analyzed it initially for our pre-test information, we sent that back to the teachers so they could provide that information to at parent-teacher conferences, so they can provide that information to parents. And so right now we're in the middle of, they are starting the intervention phase. And so we're continuing to provide support. We can hop on Zoom and help support the intervention teachers in Japan as they're going through the intervention, and check up and see how they're doing. And then we'll help support with progress monitoring and the post-test data collection. So this is probably really hard to see, but this is just an example of the narrative language measure from the Cube 3, which is what we use for the pre-test data. So each grade has its own individual benchmark assessment. Essentially, the students see the blue piece, which is just a story that if they're able to read, they're asked to read it aloud. And if they're not at that reading level, we'll read it aloud to them. So it's more of a listening comprehension measure at that time. So they're asked to read it aloud. If they struggle with any of the words, we help correct that for them, and we mark how they do during reading, so we get a reading fluency score. After they're finished reading the passage, or if the examiner needs to help them finish reading, they're asked to retell that story. And then at the top right, we score all the story grammar elements that they include in their story. So if they include the character, the setting, the problem, the feeling of the character, and then the attempt to solve the problem, and then the ending of the story. So we're listening for all of those story grammar elements when the student is retelling. We're also listening for any expository discourse elements, and the structure of their sentences, if they have complex sentences, and what tier 2 or complex vocabulary they're also using in their retells. After they retell the story, we ask some comprehension questions to check that understanding, and then also some inferential vocabulary and inferential reasoning questions. So we can get a lot of information from the story retell activity. So all the students were given an assessment in this format. And just some preliminary data looking at how they did, and keeping in mind that all of the students at the school have some sort of learning difficulty. So in elementary, when we look at decoding fluency, 72% of the students were at high to moderate risk for decoding fluency. NLM is the narrative language measure, the retell. 96% were high and moderate risk there for retelling. They just did not include a lot of the story grammar elements. And that was the same with when we asked them questions about the stories that they read or that they listened to. And then we look at the high schoolers, it's pretty similar. 62% were below benchmark expectations in reading fluency, 57% were below benchmark expectations in those story grammar elements, 47% were below benchmark expectations for using complex sentences, and then 81% were below benchmark expectations for using complex vocabulary in their sentence or in their story retell. So if I had the post-test data, it would be really interesting to see those numbers decrease. We'd love to see the student skills increase and then those concern areas go down. So hopefully in the near future, we'll be getting that back, and we'll have more information to share. So this is just a little example of the intervention that the students are doing right now. They're given the pictures, like the boy on the bike, and then the little icons below that. And then the interventionist will read a story to them, highlighting all the story grammar elements. The little icons represent each story grammar element. So the purple person is like the character, the thumbs down is the problem, the heart is the feeling, the star is the action or how they solve the problem, and then the thumbs up is the end of the story. So the examiner reads the story, the students follow along, they highlight the key story grammar elements and any tier 2 complex vocabulary in the story. And then once the examiner or the interventionist reads the story, then the students are asked to retell the story. And they retell it in a variety of times. They'll retell it with the pictures and the icons, so there's lots of support. And then we slowly fade that scaffold and fade that support. So we'll take away the pictures, so they just have those little icons to help them remember what parts to include. And then we'll take away the icons as well. And while they're participating in a small group on this retell activity, the other students are also following along, and they'll play little games to make sure that they're paying attention and listening for the story grammar elements as well. And then there's also, each story kind of builds upon itself. It gets harder and there's more complex vocabulary and more complex sentences. And there's also expository discourse practice and writing that's built into this as well. So what connection to Wyoming do we have? We do have lots of multilingual students in Wyoming, so having a variety of assessments and interventions available to help support all students is important. I know working in a variety of settings in Cheyenne, I had a lot of multilingual students who needed support, and so always looking for better and more support in that sense. This research also furthers exploring that MTSS, that multi-tier systems of support structure, as well as the systematic and explicit oral language instruction for effectively helping students with limited and weak language skills. Once we kind of get this small scale study done, I would love to see us do some more larger scale studies in Wyoming. Whole school-wide studies would be ideal. The dream. So, thank you. Being able to travel to Japan and have some funding to help us was amazing. I've also had the opportunity to work on some different research projects through Dr. Peterson, but when it's actually the data that I've helped gather and have more background knowledge on, it's just been much more meaningful and like encouraging to keep going and keep working on things. So, thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Naznin. I'm from Bangladesh and I'm a student of political science, University of Wyoming, and I'm happy to be here to share my research, women's political participation in Bangladesh national local government in comparative style. Before I start, I want to share something. The 1 month ago, when actually I was working hard to complete my thesis and research, suddenly I tripped over a mobile charger cable and I actually broke one of my toes. But this small accident actually reminded me something important. Women who are actually in the politics, they face a lot of barriers, sometimes like this cable, small, hidden, and easy to trip over. So sometimes, always it's not actually big or obvious, but still it stops women's moving forward. So in this presentation, I would like to explain the struggle of women who actually try to become leaders and why women in the political position always doesn't mean they have real power. So in Bangladesh, actually we have a paradox. Almost 30 years, Bangladesh have had women prime minister. But still, women are underrepresented in parliament and local government. And in this research, actually, I explain why, and I focus why the quota system, party politics, and cultural norm create this barrier for women, and where they actually open for women in politics and governance. So my research actually focus on the four questions. How do actually the quota system, party politics actually shape the women's political participation in parliament and the local government? And secondly, how many women are actually really participating in the decision-making process? And why often some women who are actually from the local government, they are higher than in the parliament? And lastly, why there is so little collaboration between the national and local parliament? So before discussing that, actually, if we understand the Bangladesh women's political participation, I need to explain the political history. Bangladesh was independent after 1971, after a long liberation period, and after the early years of the independence, Bangladesh actually went through a severe political instability, like military rule, authoritarian government, almost 15 years. So after 1991, Bangladesh democracy was restored, and since then, Bangladesh had held regular election. But the interesting part is that from 1991 to 2024, Bangladesh had two female prime ministers in the leading position, Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia. But interesting part is that both women actually became leaders because of their family connection and family ties. Their father and husband were the leaders of Bangladesh, that's why they are in the politics. But their participation, they are almost 30 years they are in the politics, but their participation didn't create any extra opportunities for ordinary women. So that's the interesting part. Over the 30 years they were in the leading position, but still Bangladesh women are underrepresented in the parliament and underrepresented in the local government executive body. So now I'm going to discuss about the Bangladesh parliamentary system and their quota system. Bangladesh has a unicameral parliament, and it includes 350 seats. 300 they are open for all, male and female, and they are elected directly, and 50 reserved seats for women. Actually, because of the underrepresentation, Bangladesh Constitution introduced the quota system that reserved for some seat for women in the local and national government. So. In the parliamentary system, actually, this quota system increased the number of the women in the parliament, but actually, it's just increased the number. Still, they are not the part of the decision-making process. So, if we follow this chart, actually, it represents the consistent gap between the reserved seat and the general seat. General seat actually open for all, and the reserved seat, 50 reserved seats for the women. But if we follow this bar chart, reserved seat increase over the time, but the general seat actually remained low. The last 4 elections, it was only 18 to 22. And if we follow the local government, Bangladesh local government has 4 tiers, and they have the direct election and the reserved seat. And this interesting part is that in the local government, the women are actually directly elected for the reserved seat. In parliament, they are selected, but in the local government, from the reserved seat, women have the opportunity for the direct election. So, in this bar chart actually shows that after that actually they were not in the key position actually. Only 1.4% are the city corporation member and other members below 0.5%. So the distribution of women in local government type of a seat, this pie chart shows that 86% from the reserved seat and only 14% are from the key position. Why I am actually focused on this issue? Because women are elected or selected from the reserved seat, but actually they are not in the key position. In the local government, a very large number in the government position, but there only 40% are in the key position. So that's the difference actually. And I use 4 theoretical framework: gender inequality, patriarchy, political polarization, and intersectionality. So gender inequality and patriarchy actually explain the cultural barriers, and political polarization explain how the party politics and party politics fights actually hinder the women's participation, and intersectionality actually focus on their discrimination and their privilege relating to their race, gender, their ethnicity, and their religious minority. One of the participants who are actually from the different ethnicity and minority group, she said actually she was in the politics over 20 years, but still she didn't get any leadership position because of their religious minority. So that's why I'm using these 4 theoretical framework to explain their cultural barriers and use the intersectionality. And actually, I know that to understand the women political participation, I do not rely only for the numbers. I need to hear their real stories. That's why I choose qualitative methods, and I interviewed 14 women who are actually from the ruling party and the opposition party, semi-structured interview. And for the participant, I use novel sampling and manual arithmetic coding, and 1 focus group discussion. So in short, my methodology actually focus on their participants' story and compare their stories, and actually I'm trying to finding what type of problem actually they face. So now I'm gonna discuss about the key findings. So one of the important findings actually related to the quota system. We know that any privilege or any reserve system actually increase the number of the participation, but still it's not enough for the full participation. Because one of my interview told me she actually elected from the reserve seat, and when she were in the parliament, she feel that she was the second class member of the parliament. Because they don't have actually, in the reserve seat women in Bangladesh, they don't have any particular constituency, any particular budget, or they are not actually the part of the decision-making process or in the committee head or in the key position. So it seems that there are very large number in the parliament, but actually it seems it's symbolic. The representation seems like a symbolic representation. My another finding is related to the party politics. In Bangladesh, party politics actually plays a decisive role because the nomination actually depends on the party's decision. And most of the cases in Bangladesh, actually political parties are well dominated. And many of the interviews told me actually most of the cases their male counterpart actually try to stop them to make their own decision. So in Bangladesh, for the nomination process is very crucial and depends on party politics and their male counterpart. My another important finding is related to the economic barrier. Election is very costly in Bangladesh, and most of the cases actually women are very much dependent on their family or actually party funding. And in Bangladesh, political parties are actually try to focus on the male participants. So women are actually depends on the party budget and the family wealth. So most of the cases they don't have actually the proper support from their party. And in our rural level, most of the rural politicians, they were not so educated, and for the full-time participation in the politics is quite hard for them because they need to participate in their family part. So it's very difficult for them, and in this pie chart, at 71.4% they told economic barrier is one of the important barriers to participate in the central politics, especially rural to central politics. And our rural women, they are already they are marginalized and they don't have the access actually. The black money, and most of the cases party actually nominated women who are actually from the wealthy family, not the grassroots level politicians. So where they actually focus on the wealthy families women, they actually they can actually funding them. So economic barrier is one of the crucial barriers most of the interviews told me. Another one is patriarchy. We know that in Bangladesh, patriarchy is one of the crucial points for women political participation, and they have the family and societal expectation, especially after their marriage. And even they elected, they are restricted to some common issue like women and children welfare. Actually, they don't get any important ministry or head of the important committee. Actually, they're sidelined. And one of the important findings is that the gap between national and local parliament. Nowadays, the last 20 years, actually, in our local government, women are increasingly actually participate in the politics. But after that, they didn't contact the central government. Like after 5 or 10 years, actually, if they are planning to go to the parliament, it's not possible because most of the cases, party nomination actually prefer the urban women, and in the rural areas, they are very much famous, but most of the cases in the party actually very much centralized, so they actually don't support them because most of the time they don't know about the female politicians who are from the grassroots level. But I found that they are very much famous in their areas because people trust women because of their daily demands, their daily works from government, but they don't have the proper communication to the central government. So there is a huge gap between national and the local government. And this is one of the example. Actually, I was in Bangladesh the last summer 2024 for data collection from June to August. So that time actually Bangladesh went through a severe movement, which actually against the ruling party, which actually called the 2024 July movement. So I focused this one because that time 73 women are in the parliament. But I found that not a single women politician expressed their opinion about the movement. The 70 out of 350, 73 were in the held seat, but it represents actually power. They held the seat with the presence without power, actually. So that's why I focus the July political movement. It's a huge, it's a very important and big movement the last year. But our parliament member who actually held the seat, they didn't express any single opinion. So after the research, after the findings, so I focus on some implication. Actually, it's need some changes. Quotas alone are actually not sufficient. So quotas actually, the reserve seat actually increase the numbers of the women, but actually they need the real power. So it needs reform in party structure and electoral process, and obviously it needs the very good communication between the local government and the central government, because our grassroots women are still marginalized and they are very much capable, but because of the lack of communication, they didn't contact the parliament. And I have some recommendation implement those things. So implement reforms to ensure the substantive representation, and party politics party needs some reformation about their nomination process. Not focus on their gender actually. Most of the cases party focus on the loyalty, not about their potentiality. So it needs severe changes about the party structure, and it needs adopt intersectional approaches, because most of the women not faces problem about their gender, but about their class, about their race, about their ethnicity and their religion minority. And because of the July movement, I have some limitation, because I didn't contact, I only contact the Dhaka city, which is the capital of the Bangladesh. So it needs actually rigorous interview from the other side. Because of the July movement, during that time, the country actually went through a severe situation. That's why I didn't contact all over the country actually. So it needs more voice from across the country, and it needs actually long-term study and analysis. And at the end, I would like to say actually, presence, just numerical presence actually cannot increase the women's participation. We don't need the symbolic representation. Number matters, but power matters more. So that's all about my research. I did the last 2 years, and it's also my master's thesis also. And I would like to thankful to the Centennial Fund and Center for Global Studies Research Grant for this program. And thank you very much to all for being here. And if you have any question, you can ask me. Thank you very much.